Let's get right into it. Number 5, the platypus. Picture this. It's 1798, and Captain John Hunter sends back a sketch and pelt of this bizarre creature from Australia. European scientists took one look and said, "Nice try, but we're not falling for this obvious fake." Can you blame them? This thing had a duck's bill, beaver tail, webbed feet, and supposedly laid eggs like a reptile. It was like someone had glued random animal parts together as a joke. Even when they got their hands on an actual preserved specimen, they were convinced it was an elaborate hoax. Scientists literally examined it with magnifying glasses, looking for stitches where someone might have sewn different animals together. George Shaw, the guy who finally described it officially, basically apologized while doing it. He wrote that skepticism was not only reasonable but praiseworthy, and that he almost doubted his own eyes. The platypus seemed to break every rule they thought they knew about biology. Mammals don't lay eggs, right? Wrong. Mammals don't have bills, right? Wrong again. And here's the kicker. This innocent-looking creature is actually venomous. The males have spurs that can inject venom powerful enough to cause excruciating pain in humans. Talk about nature's practical joke. The platypus proved that sometimes reality is stranger than any myth we could dream up. It forced scientists to completely rethink what was biologically possible and opened the door to accepting other seemingly impossible creatures. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this where we explore the fascinating connections between myth and reality. Number 4, dragons and dinosaur bones. Dragons appear in cultures all over the world, from Europe to China to the Americas. That's weird, right? These cultures had no contact with each other, yet they all independently came up with stories about giant, reptilian, fire-breathing monsters. Here's what probably happened. Ancient people kept finding these massive fossilized bones buried in the ground. Picture a farmer 2,000 years ago digging up what we now know as a T-Rex skull. To him, it's proof that giant monsters once roamed the earth. In China, they still sell powdered fossils as dragon bones in traditional medicine shops. These aren't actual dragon bones, obviously. They're fossilized remains of ancient mammals and dinosaurs that have been ground up and sold as remedies for everything from madness to stomach problems. The thing is, these ancient fossil discoveries weren't random. China sits on some of the richest fossil beds in the world, home to massive sauropods and other prehistoric giants. When ancient Chinese people found these enormous skeletons, complete with razor-sharp teeth and claws, what else were they supposed to think? The bones matched their dragon mythology perfectly. Long before modern paleontology existed, people were essentially doing their own archaeological work, uncovering evidence of creatures that seemed too fantastic to be real. Comment your location and let me know if you've ever found any interesting fossils or bones where you live. Number 3, the kraken and giant squids. For centuries, sailors told stories about massive tentacles erupting from the ocean, capable of crushing entire ships. These weren't just tall tales told in taverns. These were detailed accounts from experienced mariners who staked their reputations on what they'd seen. The scientific community dismissed these stories as sailor superstitions until something incredible happened in the 1870s. Massive carcasses started washing up on the beaches of Newfoundland. These weren't just big squids, these were monsters, stretching up to 40 feet long with tentacles thick as tree trunks. Carl Linnaeus, the guy who basically invented the modern system for classifying animals, took these sailor stories seriously. He suspected the kraken was some kind of cephalopod, the same family that includes octopuses and regular squids. Turns out, he was absolutely right. Giant squids can grow up to 60 feet long and possess the largest eyes of any living creature on Earth. These eyes are the size of dinner plates, perfectly adapted for spotting prey and predators in the pitch-black depths of the ocean. They hunt alone, just like the legendary kraken, and they're strong enough to battle sperm whales. Scientists have found sperm whales with circular scars all over their bodies, proof of epic underwater battles between these titans. The giant squid remained hidden until 2004, when researchers finally captured the first footage of one alive in its natural habitat. For over a century, we had proof these creatures existed, but we'd never seen one swimming free in the deep ocean. Number 2, mermaids and manatees. This one's going to blow your mind because it seems impossible that anyone could confuse a slow-moving, 1,000-pound sea cow with a beautiful half-human, half-fish creature. but it happened all the time, so much so that scientists named the entire group Sirenia, after the mythical sirens. Christopher Columbus himself recorded a mermaid sighting in 1493, near what's now the Dominican Republic. In his ship's log, he wrote that he saw 3 mermaids, but noted they weren't nearly as beautiful as they were painted. That's because they weren't mermaids at all. Columbus had encountered manatees, and honestly, his description makes perfect sense when you know what to look for. Manatees are about 6 feet long, roughly human height. They have finger-like bones in their flippers that look surprisingly human when seen underwater. They can turn their necks and even stand upright in shallow water, appearing almost human-like from a distance. Add in some green algae growing on their backs, which could look like flowing hair underwater, and you've got yourself a mermaid sighting. The confusion gets even more understandable when you consider the conditions these sailors were working under. They'd been at sea for months, dealing with isolation, poor nutrition, and according to some historians, severe deprivation of human contact. Make sure to share this video with someone who loves learning about the weird connections between mythology and science. Anything floating in the water became a projection of these sailors' desperate need for human contact. Explorer John Smith reported seeing a mermaid with green hair in the Caribbean in 1614. That green hair was probably just algae growing on a manatee's back, something that happens all the time in warm, nutrient-rich waters. European maps from this era actually marked mermaid locations in areas where we now know manatees were abundant. These weren't random fantasy drawings, they were marking real encounters with real animals that sailors genuinely believed were mythical sea maidens. Number 1. Cyclops and elephant skulls. This connection is absolutely mind-blowing because it explains one of the most famous monsters in Greek mythology. Ancient Greeks exploring Mediterranean islands kept finding these massive skulls with what looked like a single, giant eye socket right in the center. These weren't Cyclops skulls. They were the fossilized remains of dwarf elephants that had lived on these islands thousands of years earlier. Here's the thing about elephant skulls that makes this mistake so understandable. The eye sockets are tiny, barely noticeable compared to the massive nasal cavity right in the center of the skull. That nasal cavity is where the trunk attached. But since trunks contain no bones, they rarely fossilize. What you're left with is a skull twice the size of a human head with what appears to be one enormous eye socket dead center. Greeks had never seen a living elephant, so they had no frame of reference for what they were looking at. These dwarf elephants had survived on islands like Sicily for thousands of years because there were no natural predators. They lived peacefully until humans arrived about 11,000 years ago and hunted them to extinction within a century. When later Greek explorers found these skulls scattered around caves, often separated from other bones, they saw exactly what their mythology had prepared them to see. Evidence of the Cyclops, the one-eyed giants of legend. The Cyclops myth became so embedded in Greek culture that it shaped how they interpreted these fossil discoveries, creating a perfect feedback loop between mythology and paleontology. These discoveries show us that our ancestors weren't just making up random stories around campfires. They were trying to make sense of real evidence they found in the natural world. Every mythical creature we've talked about represents ancient people doing their best to explain the unexplainable with the knowledge they had at the time. The next time you hear about some legendary monster, remember that there might be more truth to it than you think. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.